Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and today we have a very special podcast to wrap up the end of the 2024 year. Garrett and I have gone through and picked out some of our favorite Blue Oval podcast clips from this past year. And man, it was a lot of fun to do. You don't realize how many incredible performances we've seen throughout this year. We didn't just cherry pick all the best performances throughout the year to put in this. We wanted to add some of our favorite clips as well. But it's hard not to include a lot of these because we saw so many outstanding performances from some of the all-time greats in the NCAA during this 2024 season. Many different NCAA records broken, many incredible races, so many transfers. We had so many transfer portal news or breaking transfer requests throughout the year. There was really never a dull moment throughout the 2024 season. So we are going to go through and recap our year of looking at all these great performances, all this impactful news. But sit back, relax, enjoy the 2024 year that was for the Blue Oval podcast. As we get ready for another great year, we want to thank you guys for supporting us, listening to us. It means the world to us that when Garrett and I get behind these mics in our empty rooms, that we're not just talking to each other, we're talking to you, to all of you as well. So thank you for all of that. Happy New Year. And without any further ado, let's play the clips. We saw an NCAA record run this week, and we can't lead with that because this is even better. It's absolutely stunning to think that we would see like sub fours at 7,000 feet is quite frankly mind-boggling. But to run that far under and to run that far under 350 converted for a 5K, 10K runner. Like, let's not make any bones about it. This is a 5K, 10K runner. Right? And of course, we've talked about altitude miles, a lot more like strength component rather than speed compared to just sea level mile. But still, like, we're talking about a guy who excels at the longer distances. He's a great cross country runner. He's not known as like a great 800-meter runner.
No.
Absolutely stunning performance from Nico Young.
We will talk about the controversy that surrounds this, that has surrounded performances like these for years. We will touch on that after we touch on a few of the other altitude performances. But just first, in terms of what this means for Nico and how we view him going forward. Usually we would have this performance, and I would probably say something along the lines of, "That's great, but does it really change anything?" And to an extent, that's still true, right? This is still a strength-based performance, right? We've known he's a strength-based guy. From that aspect, it's not terribly surprising. I'm not saying that the result isn't surprising, but the fact that he was able to thrive in a strength-based kind of race, that makes sense. But this is such an unbelievable result. It goes so far and beyond what I think we all thought was probably doable right now. To run 357 that far under 4, it leads me to believe that you're like, you know what? After that 737 that he ran the 3K, where he showed us a great kick, and now he comes out and runs 357 at 7,000 feet, I don't know if I've ever seen someone have this good of a start through 2 races of an indoor track season. I just don't know if that's been done before, at least not on the distance side. So when I continue to look at this, I think, you know what, maybe this does mean something for the national meet hopes, the national title hopes. Maybe to varying degrees, who knows? But at the very least, I'm feeling increasingly more confident in the regular season, probably more so than I ever have about Nico Young than before.
Yeah, so I have a whole take on this, and a lot of it is the first part of what you're saying of an amazing performance. I don't know how much this moves the needle in terms of like what we can expect from him at nationals in terms of like in a more tactical race? Does this make him does this really change the way we see him? And I think it does a little bit, as you're saying. But gosh darn it, it doesn't we don't need to talk about the postseason right now. This if all we care about in these regular season races is how it's gonna reflect at nationals, we're going to miss the whole joy of running and of analyzing and looking at these races. Because if you can't get excited about a 357 mile at 7,000 feet that converts to a 348, just don't watch track until NCAA's. It just don't just leave. And I know I'm guilty of this and looking at a race and being like, well, great performance, but it doesn't really change my opinion of him or her. And we gotta I don't think they're better or worse off after this performance when it comes to nationals. But we got to get out of that mindset sometimes when you see these breathtaking performances. And I'm talking to myself almost as much as I am talking to random third person out
Just
there.
at me, Ben. Just at me. I don't.
But not everything boils down to national championships. Obviously, they're the most important thing. Winning a title is, I'm sure Nico Young would trade this performance for a couple national titles. But that said, this is still an incredible accomplishment that we need to be excited about, because championship or not, this is probably as close to a top performance that we're going to see all year.
Well, that was going to be my next question, which is, what was more impressive, Graham Blanks' NCAA 5K record, or this performance from Nico Young? And I asked this in our First Thoughts article, and I also threw into Nota Mastada's 1K record from this past weekend, which we'll touch on later. I threw that one in there as an option as well. Who has had the better performance this season?
I think I voted Nico Young. And again, Graham Blanks, 13:03, incredibly fast, NCAA record, awesome. This Young performance just feels like it's from a different stratosphere in terms of we just haven't seen anything quite like this before. We've seen fast 5Ks, we've seen guys run in the 13 O's before, and in a race that is longer distance, a few seconds difference isn't quite as big of a margin. But when you're seeing something like this in the mile for a guy that again is not a miler and doing it at 7,000 feet, I just think it's such a paradigm shifting performance for what's possible at altitude in this event.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to put it. It kind of shifts, and it's one of those performances where it really does change the what is possible, what can the human body physically do, kind of thing. It's one of those performances. Speaking of another altitude, I'm going to move on because we are ultimately going to circle back to this conversation. New Mexico's Hauptum Samuel runs 3:59 at altitude, 4,900 feet, almost 5,000 feet, on his home track. Great speed there. Runs 3:53 conversion, 3:53.92. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about this. Again, strength-based mile, strength-based guy, runs under 4 minutes. It's a 2,000 feet lower than Flagstaff. It kind of makes sense. 3:53, okay, the magnitude of that performance is, I think, roughly on par. And then separately, the other mile performance, which I'm completely missing here, Maggie Congdon, who was also at that same NAU meet, she runs 4:40 at 7,000 feet, which is another real, if Nico Young hadn't just dominated that race, we would be talking about Maggie Congdon as the main headliner.
Sure.
But a 4:30 conversion is pretty wild. And I think, Ben, in all of this, we can keep having these circular conversations about what this means, but let's just get down to what everyone wants to know, which is, are the altitude conversions fair? Are they accurate? What should be the purpose of them? Do you think that there needs to be a revisiting? Thoughts?
So I think they are fair, and we have this argument every single time we see a kind of jaw-dropping conversion time. Christian Serrato's comes to mind, and then he backs it up immediately at University of Washington at sea level. Now, I think there is nuance to this. that someone training at altitude, living at altitude, and is more of a strength-based runner, someone like Nico Young, those conversions might be a, a little bit uh, over aggressive for someone like him. Do I think he can actually run 3:48 in the mile? That's where it's like I don't know if he can do that at sea level. Do I think he can run 350 based off this performance? Yes, yeah, I do. But for someone like, let's say, someone who's coming up from sea level runs 357 at 7,000 feet. Now I think 348 is at overwhelmingly a fair conversion. So I think they're like every athlete has a slightly different adaptation to altitude, and I think those conversions vary depending on the athlete. Overall, though, I think my headline out of all this, I think they're more than fair for the average person.
But you don't think Nico Young could run 348?
I don't necessarily. I just think that is an extra level of speed that I just don't think he has.
I think, so anyone who listens to Lay 9 or interview series, we just recently interviewed Aiden Troutner of BYU.
Mm-hmm.
He ran 359 in Provo, first guy on indoor mile sub 4 minute on Utah soil. Excuse me. And on that episode, I told him, hey man, I am a believer in altitude conversions. I've backed it up. I've said it repeatedly. I've gone down the list, so on. Here's where I'm stuck. And I don't know if this take's going to make any sense because I've thought it through a handful of times and I still don't know if this makes sense. I think the magnitude, the impressiveness of a performance like Nico Young, Maggie Congdon, Happen Samuel, the impressiveness is equal to what the equivalent time was. Do I think Nico Young can run for a 348? No, I don't. Sorry. Maybe 351? Sure. So then it comes down to, well, then Garrett, that performance may by magnitude standard equal like a 348, but in reality, we need to know who can run what. And if I'm someone who's lower on the national leaderboard and I'm like, well, wait, what just happened? Like I've been running purely faster all season, but there's this conversion that throws this guy way ahead. I can imagine and be understandably a little frustrated with that aspect. So I think you're right. I think there needs to be nuance in terms of like what the athlete, where they live and train. But I also don't necessarily think it's wrong in the aspect of like reflecting how just strong that performance is, but it's also like, should that also be then reflected in how fast someone thinks you can run? And I think that's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't considered like basically what you're saying is the conversion is a good way of translating how good a performance this was into terms that we're more used to understanding. Like at 357 mile at 7,000 feet, we should have the same reaction as we would if someone ran 348. Like I totally understand that. Again, I think it just varies. There's never going to be a perfect like altitude conversion, and there runners who primarily have the opportunity to race at altitude shouldn't be penalized for being like running slower times just because they're mostly racing at 5,000 or 7,000 feet. So there needs to be a conversion, but it's hard for me to say that there's ever going to be a perfect one. So I default to this has worked and seemed to be pretty fair throughout the years. Is it going to be a little off for certain runners? Absolutely. But we can't make a perfect one size fits all for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the altitude conversions are not going anywhere. Like they have to stay. There's no possible way that you can just be like, well, just go to sea level. It's like that's ridiculous. You just can't do it. It's just not fair. Like I mean, and I think at the very end of the day, look at all of the best cross country teams out there. Yeah, sure, there's NAU and BYU, but if you go down to the Division II level, forget anyone who's not in the RMAC. Like there's Grand Valley State and there's Wingate maybe one other that I'm forgetting, but that's about it. It's completely and consistently, historically, D2 is dominated by Adams State, Colorado Mines, Western Colorado, CSU Pueblo, UC Colorado Springs. Like, pretty much those 5 schools dominate Division II, and it's not really close. Maybe throw Chico State in there with a few others that I mentioned earlier. So there's history suggesting that these guys really are the best of the best of the best. But how that translates, I agree. It's not going to be perfect. It will never be perfect. And I just don't know what else there is to do. Maybe nerf it a little bit. Maybe nerf by this much. But I don't necessarily have a dramatic problem with it. So
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the men's 1500. So in this men's 1500, I mentioned earlier in the women's 800 discussion that they had one of the worst like heats in the entire national championships. The worst is almost certainly the second heat of the men's 1500, which is a blood bath. Reinhardt Harrison, great job getting here, sir. You have zero chance at making it. Alex Stitt, no chance. Peter Smith, I'm sorry, no chance. There are 9 men in here outside of those 3 guys, really. And Charlie O'Donovan, sorry, you're kind of on the fringe. So it's like 8.5 that you could make very compelling All-American. Like, this could be your All-American group. Like, and I'll walk you through. It's Isaac Baston, Nathan Green, Ezekiel Ropp, Elliot Cook, Adam Spencer, Colin Solomon, Luke Hauser, Joe Waska.
And that's like, in addition to Alex Stitt, Peter Smith, yeah, Reinhardt Harrison, and Charlie O'Donovan.
Like, yeah, that could be your 8. Like, the guys that I listed. Like, that could be your All-American, like, 8. And they are all in one heat together. It is absolutely ridiculous. There are going to be great names that do not make the finals because the first heat is not good. Like, you made it to the national championships. It's a huge accomplishment, but there's just way too many East guys that aren't quite up to the same level as a lot of these guys that are in the second heat. It is going to like some of these guys in this first heat are just going to have, like, I feel like a walk in the park, like Liam Murphy, Ethan Strand, Parvesh Khan, Gary Martin, Anas Esai. Like, those should be the 5. Like, that should be a quite an easy run through for them. I have zero idea what we're going to see out of the second heat.
There are 12 individuals in the first heat. 11 of them are from the East region, which is fascinating. That second heat is, I mean, like, there's just be times where it's like, use common sense. Yes, I know we're going by the book, but like, use common sense. I mean, look at the guys here that like you have in this field. It's unbelievable. In terms of national title favorites, this is where it gets a little tricky.
I just had a question mark next to that.
Okay, cool. I think there are 4.
There's at least 3, I think.
There's
right?
At least 3. I think the 3 that we have in mind are Hauser, Spencer, Colin Solomon.
Yep.
And then the 4th one is probably Nathan Green. I mean, he's run 334 and he's the defending champion. Like, what does he need to do?
Yeah. You're right. It's just
who would have been your 4th if it wasn't Green? Murphy?
I don't think I necessarily would have had a 4th because I think then that just opens the door in my mind to like a lot of other guys.
I don't think Green opens the door. I think he's the defending champion who's run 334. Like, I don't think he does it. Like,
no, you make a compelling argument, and I don't necessarily disagree too much with that. I in my mind those I think are the 3 main guys, but there's just it seems like there's so little separation between them and like our All-American favorites. Like, I could absolutely see. I mean, we've seen Elliot Cook beat a lot like Luke Hauser this year. Like, we've seen guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be All-American favorites come in and beat some of these guys. So I think it is those 3. it's gonna be brutal to pick between one of those guys. I have a selection made, but I'm probably gonna go back and forth on that over the next few days.
Now I have to figure out who you picked. I'm so fascinated. Well, there's some interesting picks here. Oh, okay. All right. All right. In terms of like your sleepers, for the title, I think that's like a Liam Murphy kind of
Yeah,
conversation. You could convince me as like a deep sleeper for the title is Ethan Strand or Parvesh Khan. Some of those guys. I think in terms of like the All American picture, love Damian Hackett. Love Damian Hackett. I think he's in a great heat that like
yep.
he can absolutely get out of. I think it could be fast, but not like overtly fast. I think he is tactically one of the single best runners in this field. I think he's just very underrated. I could absolutely see him being an All American, and in fact, I might actually just predict that. So
That's how I feel about Wes Porter, and I'm not.
mm,
I don't think I'm going to predict him to be an All-American, but I do think that he's in that first heat. He's running with teammate Gary Martin. He's experienced runner, hasn't run anything crazy fast this year, but knows his way around these kind of fields. I could definitely see him making it through and like finishing 10th at the finals and being very close to getting one of those All-American spots. For wild card, I have Elliott Cook. I can't quit him after those Pac-12 performances. I think he has just a very wide range of outcomes. If he was in this first heat, I think I would consider him like an All-American lock, but I don't think you can really call that many guys an All-American lock in the second heat.
the most obvious wild card in this field, it's so apparent. It's Anas Sai.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't know if he's going to finish his prelim race. But I don't. There's multiple instances where he has not.
He's not going to be pushed nearly as hard in this prelim as he has in
Are
years
we
past.
sure? Are we sure? Because if you think about like some of the guys in that second heat, I think they're going to be trying to play cat and mouse because they don't want to put themselves as a sacrificial lamb in that second heat.
Yeah, I
Although I
agree,
guess
but
if
I don't
you
like.
go
I
back for
think
that
he's not going to
argument,
have to go to like his like highest gear in this first heat to make sure he qualifies.
I mean, did he have to go? Did he have to do that during the winter months?
No, but I think he had to get a little closer than I think he'll have to this weekend.
Yeah, they still had to be pretty honest in that first heat. They were 357 back in the mile at the indoor national meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's my X factor there. It's a necessity. I mean, he just has to be. I don't know how else you could do that. Going back to that second heat though, you mentioned Reinhard Harrison, maybe Charlie O'Donovan. So I think this already answers my question. Um, Alex Stitt and Peter Smith. Of those four, who is the most likely to get out?
I think Charlie O'Donovan.
Charlie O'Donovan. Okay, so now
Experience, he's run the times.
okay, let me now break it down to those three. Now get rid of Charlie O'Donovan. Of those
Alex
three
Stitt.
remaining,
I
Alex, I agree.
And I realized as I was doing my predictions, I was like, I look like the biggest Oklahoma State fan in the world because I like a lot of especially in the long like the 5K 10K distances on both men and women's side. I just like what we've seen out of Alex Stitt. It's unfortunate that he's in this heat. I think you can make a pretty compelling argument that he'd make it out of the first because he's just been a very competitive runner at high competitions over the last year or so. But it's just gonna be a bloodbath in that second heat.
Yeah, it is going to be a bloodbath, and I cannot believe they actually put all those guys together. So
We talked about our
sorry.
we talked about our three favorites. They're all in the same heat. That should never happen. That is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. Okay, 15 though.
All right, well, let's go to the women's 15, where Maia Ramsden has taken the chaos straight out of the 1500 meters by just being the best runner in the country. And I mean, we're going to have the conversation at some point about maybe one of the best 1500 meter runners ever, or 1500 milers ever in the NCAA. 4:06 to take home the win, took the lead from Lindsey Butler, like a little after halfway, and just never looked back. Like it just put in a huge gap. Kimberly May, Claudia Kazmierska gave chase as much as they could, but no one was even in the same ballpark as Ramsden. Like today, this year, quite frankly, she has just been that much better. And this result and her ability to just front run and just like surge, like not just like from 400 out, but from 600, 700 meters out, and just completely put the race to bed that early is just stunning. And I haven't seen quite anything like it in these middle distances, really on the men or women's side, that I can think of. And she just makes it look, quite frankly, easy. And she did that once again this weekend.
Like, you see the gap she opens up and you're like, does she miscount? Like, you just don't know. Like it's you cannot believe that someone's that dominant in an event that really shouldn't be. And like, isn't it wild that the women have chosen to be way more honest in these
Oh, yeah.
races than the men? The men are like, nah, we're good. We're actually going to leave this up to like a true jog fest, which I never truly understood. I guess, I don't know. I don't know if there's a good answer to
It
that. I
wasn't
can see.
true. I would say, I mean, obviously they were coming through like not like in 65 seconds at any point. Like they were a little like it was somewhere in between like honest and jog fest. For the women, it was full go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think in this day and age, like 3:39 for me, like even winning that time, like just with having everyone there,
Yeah,
to me, it's still just super tactical and a
sure.
borderline jog. Maybe not a complete jog fest, but yeah, I think the problem with like the Ramsden conversation of like all time best miler is that like she has the credentials, but like Jenny Behringer,
Yeah.
right, is the one who has run what 3:59 for
Yep.
1500, I think. But she has 1 mile national title and all of her other successes in the steeplechase and in other events, right? So it's like, well, then wait, how do you decide in this very like black and white world of like they are the best, they're not the best, whoever it is. How do you reconcile the fact that like Behringer was faster, she has a title, and all of her accolades are just as arguably as good, but Ramsden has proven to be the best overall miler over probably like a 2 year stretch, year and a half stretch, whatever it may be. Um, and that's like I think the hard part of that conversation. But I can't believe that we were at a point asking like who's maybe going to be more dominant in their respective races of Ramsden versus Valby. It was still Valby, but like not by a lot.
Yeah, both pretty much came through as much as you could have expected. And I think that's the like we've seen dominance over the higher distances, but when you get to that 800 and the 1500 meter especially and the mile, it's just so hard to completely just suck the randomness out of it. And she's just that good, that consistent to be able to do that. And I keep harping on that because it like even some of the best men and women we've seen in this event still lose like a lot of times because like the NCAA championships are a different beast, and Ramsden has not fallen prey to that whatsoever. Behind her, I think like you run down this list, it's all a lot of these women you would expect who have had great seasons: Kimberly May, Claudia Kazmierska, Melissa Riggins, Flamina Askell, Shannon Flockhart, Lindsey Butler, and then Olivia Howe finishing out that All American spot in eighth. I mean, it's a true representation of all these women. Like they all fully deserved it. They were, I think, smart to kind of hold back a little bit from Ramsden's move because I think they would have blown up if they had if women had tried to go with her. But they had a fantastic chase back, and ultimately it was May who came out in front. And pretty much any other year, I think May is at least a 1-2 time champion over the course of the year.
Yeah, and these are the things that like I struggle because like May is more deserving of a national title than prior women over the past five
Yeah.
to 10 years who have won a national title in this event. She just is. Like the season, the year she's put together is phenomenal. Um, I don't really know how much more I can say about her, but kind of going down the list, it's very chalk. Kazmierska, great race, her best race ever, but I think we also knew that like she probably had something like this within her. Um, Reagan's fourth, almost actually a complete match of her mile performance from the indoor championships. Asacol fifth, good result. Flockhart sixth, Butler seventh, Howe eighth. I mean, like, yeah, you could have said, okay, I thought Congdon or Bush or Scheinbecker or O'Sullivan would have been in that mix, but like, I think you could have put these women in any order outside of like May and Ramsden at 1-2. But I think you could have put everyone else in any order, and I could have been like, okay, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it was a loaded field, and yeah, Kazimierska, this was definitely like her best performance, and we hadn't seen her quite feel like at her best at like we had maybe last season. But she peaked at the right time, and we knew she had the talent to be capable of something like this. I don't have that much. And Ascol, like I know there's been some question marks about her consistency, and obviously we knew at her best she could hang. So props to her for just like coming through this weekend. She looked very very good in prelims, very very good in the finals. When we bring up those question marks, we also have to praise when she absolutely comes through, and she did that.
I like that. Yep, I think you're absolutely right. Especially because she had to go through the rounds of like that 15, 5K, neither of which were slow at the East Regional meet. Came back like she obviously faltered a bit in the 5K, but no one's going to blame her there. So yeah, so all right, I'm with you. I think that's all I really got there on the women's 15. What did you want to
Anyways, Ben, let's talk about something that will change our sport as we know it.
Everything.
I mean, it will change everything. And that is the NCAA settlement. Do you want to take this? Should I take this?
I will let you lay it out because I think you have a better handle on it. I have some. I'll fill in any points that I feel like we haven't touched on, but I think you taking the lead here is good.
Okay, so on Thursday, the House versus the NCAA settlement was filed. Still needs to be approved by a federal judge, but it is basically to settle a series of antitrust lawsuits over 10 years that will pay out $2.8 billion to athletes who missed out on NIL deals from 2017 to 2020. Our guy Ben's getting the paycheck. Let's go.
I'm getting an $8 check. I can't wait.
And then they're going to tax it too. It's going to be great.
Oh,
But Ben's going to get Ben's going to be able to buy like 3 packs of gum. And on top of that, they are now also allowing schools, Division One. I do not think this applies to D2 or D3. And frankly, I don't even think it would really matter. But schools are now able to pay their athletes via the athletic department revenue. The Power 5 schools can pay up to $21 million annually to these athletes. How they split it up, how it happens, like it still seems like it's all still very tentative. And
we can all guess where the majority of that money is going to go.
Cross country? No, not at all. And on top of that, the most important part and part of all of this is that there are now also new scholarship limits, and there are now new roster limits. By the way, anyone who's saying that there's no more scholarship limits, it's bad language. It's bad verbiage. The scholarships for cross country, men and women, are now both at 17. The roster spots are also at 17. So basically, there's a scholarship opportunity for every roster spot. The track and field, there's 45 scholarships, both men and women. And if you run cross country and track, I've been told that will count towards both. So in terms of the,
which is significant. That? Like that's huge, right? Like
right.
The fact that you're counting 2 or 3 times, basically.
Right. So basically, if you are going to have your entire cross country team also be your entire distance crew on the track, then in theory, if it's assuming that we're maxing out scholarships here, let's just make that assumption, then in theory, then you only have 28 scholarships left for everything else. Even more distance if you want to. It's just those distance guys won't even be.
Well, and even if you're not giving 17 scholarships, you only have 17 roster spots. Like it's like even if you're not giving everyone those full ride, like all that money, you're still going to be maxed out no matter what.
And that's where this gets tricky. Now, I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, and I don't have this exact detail correct, but I believe that the Power Five schools must abide by these new regulations. Okay, meaning that when they do pay out athletic department revenue, they'll have to then follow these regulations. However, all of the let me see, I want to get this right specifically. It's the group of five schools, the FCS, the non-football playing Division One programs. Those are not bound by these new roster limits, these new rules, if they do not share revenue. So if they don't share revenue, then according to Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports, that does not apply to them, which is an extremely interesting caveat. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to go a little bit more detailed. So basically, if they're not paying their athletes outside of like on top of their scholarships, or independent of their scholarships, those universities will be allowed to have as many roster spots for their, or they won't have these certain
Right, it won't be
roster
whatever the
limits,
restrictions are now.
that other schools will.
What is your initial interpretation of everything?
So I mean, it's really interesting. I think we've touched on the roster bit a bunch because I really think that is like kind of the thing that's flown under the radar, where it's like that is significant for cross country. Like it is not like 17 is not a big amount. Like
No.
for like just my own experience at Belmont, like we were not a big program and we had small teams, like but we were at 12 to 15 guys, like, and again, that was a smaller group. And so a lot of these big universities where you had like a lot of scholarship guys, but then you had a ton of walk-ons in different like situations there, those like opportunities are now going to be gone, which I think is really a bummer. For it's like, hey, you grew up in Tuscaloosa, for example. You're not good enough to warrant a scholarship. Let's say you're a 420 miler coming out of high school on the men's side, or you're like a 510 miler on the women's side. You the opportunity for you to get a roster spot is going to be so much more difficult because of these rules now, than it ever has been before. Because I mean, before, hey, coach, sure, we'll take a flyer on you. We're not paying you anything. You can be on the team. No skin off our back, really. Now that is going to be significantly different. And I'm curious to see if this changes at all, like the way coaches coach their teams, the way they train, because it's not like you have 20 guys or 30 guys to be able to say, hey, like 8 guys got hurt this year. That's okay. We got 20 more. Like if 8 guys get hurt, you don't have, you have
You're
a
done.
7-person roster, pretty much 7 to 9 man roster, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I am very curious to just see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's and like it's also very easy for 8 guys just to not be available.
Yes.
Two,
Oh yes.
3 guys get injured. One guy gets ill. One guy has to go for a job interview across the country. Someone's family member, is not doing well, and they have to go tend to them. And all of a sudden, you have very little to work with, and it's a scary realization. Now, I think the fear is that in order to fund the 20 new scholarships that are now being allowed into football,
Mhm.
a lot of schools are going to be saying, well, how are they going to make up these costs? In theory, that could leave track and field and cross country on the chopping block, as well as other non-revenue driving sports, wrestling, swimming, etc. And on top of that, the roster limits. I mean, Ben, this time next year, the transfer portal is going to be booming.
Oh, it's gonna be wild.
It's going to be awful. But I do want to throw this out there and have everyone think about this. This is going to apply, all these things that I just said will apply to the Power Five. But how many of those non-Power Five schools, how many of those mid-major schools are really going to have the athletic department revenue to pay out these kids? They're not. And like, Frank, who would that be? Is it Gonzaga for their men's basketball team? Maybe, yeah. So maybe Gonzaga now has to follow this. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just throwing that out there. But like, think about it. Every mid-major program that's competitive at football. Tulane, think like Tulane. What's going to happen there? Just is Tulane going to start doing payouts? And if so, is that going to impact their program at all? So, but because those mid majors are not doing, may not do, I should say, may not do the revenue share, they don't have to cut kids in theory. They don't have to. So,
and that is an advantage in one way, but and I think that's almost more of an advantage for teams that are either right on the national bubble or are like right below that tier, where it's like, hey, you can just stock up on men and women. You're not going to get the cream of the crop in terms of international or like domestic recruits. But hey, you can take a lot of lottery tickets and just hope that a couple of them hit pretty well. I'm curious for a school like, NAU. Like, what is this going to look like for them, where they are the program on the cross country side? Are they going to be able to be competitive if they're not able to offer paying athletes essentially? For these top recruits? Is that going to play a role? And underlying all this, how many programs are actually going to be paying cross country and track runners? That's the thing we don't really know yet, because you can easily see like most programs or most universities saying, hey, this juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like for us to pay athletes that are playing in sports that are non-revenue.
Well, they might have to. I don't know what the Title IX challenges there.
Well, yeah, I wonder if Title IX, obviously that can be split up on like men and women's basketball and like football throws a wrinkle in there,
right? But I still don't know if it's just like I don't know if there's some kind of if there would be any rule or regulation. I just don't know.
Yeah,
that would say like, well, these teams get it, but these teams don't. And so it's I think I don't know if like anyone really knows right now.
No, they're still ironing out. I think a lot of these things.
Yeah, which is crazy because it's set to start next year, assuming that this judge approves
the women's 5K, and someone who did not need to kick at all to win her race was Parker Valby, setting an NCAA record, breaking her own NCAA record, running 14:52. Just a utterly dominating performance, to the point that my wife now knows who Parker Valby is, despite not knowing anything about running. She texted me and she's like, "Who's this Parker Valby girl?" I was like, "Yeah, this makes sense. She just won 2 NCAA titles, got the meet record in both, and an NCAA record in the 5K. Just, she's on another planet." And the overwhelming thought that I had after this race was, man, I really wish Caitlin Toohey just hung on for one more semester, because this would have been a titanic clash. And honestly, I think Valby probably still would have won, but man, would have that have been exciting.
It's beginning now, because obviously she won the 3K. We'll talk about the 3K later. She has now won 4 titles in the past year, last 3 seasons of competition. I remember when the Toohey versus Valby debate first began, and it really wasn't a debate. It was Toohey. It was undoubtedly Toohey. There was no question about it. But now this is like one you actually have to think about. Toohey is still, if you look at overall resumes and longevity, blah, 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 I still think Toohey has the slightest edge, but I don't think I would at this point be against anyone who said Valby. What she's accomplished off of such an unconventional approach to her racing, such little mileage, all cross training. She described this effort as a 6 or 7 out of 10. She ran 14:52, Ben. It's a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's just, I don't know. And someone go out there and find them. Maybe with like Athing Mo, who the most naturally talented middle long distance runner has been in the past 10, 20 years. I'm sure there are names I don't know, but I don't know how anyone could just be this naturally gifted. And that's what I'm blown away about.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch her put it together, and it really seems as simple as long as she's healthy and running somewhat, she's going to run some crazy time. And yeah, 4 titles like out of the last 4 that she could have won, like, is pretty incredible. And you, to go back to the kind of the Tui versus Valby argument, I think Tui undoubtedly was the more consistent runner. You could expect her to show up to more races, and you knew exactly what you're going to get from her almost time in and time out. But I don't think it's any less arguable or inarguable that Valby has a higher ceiling than what Tui has shown. Like, for her to run these times, and when she's at her peak, I don't think collegiate Tui ever really reached those same heights.
I think collegiate Tui probably had more all-around value.
Yes,
just like you
absolutely.
said, in terms of the consistency, in terms of the range of her records, like I
the
don't
mile, yeah,
the mile. I mean, her durability. From that perspective, so really it depends on kind of what aspects you're
your
looking at.
taste, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But congrats to Valby about that 100. I know we're a distance podcast,
yeah.
but that 100 was so much fun. And all my, because I have friends, like, because like around where I live is also around where Noah Lyles grew up and was born, with the high school, all that jazz. And so a lot of the people are like familiar with him around here, and they're like, is he favored? Can he do it? And the way that I put it was this: I think going into the 100, you could make the argument that he was probably the favorite. If he wasn't, he was maybe close to it. Like, if someone said that they liked him the most in that going into that race, I would have said, okay, sure. But I still would have taken the field over him.
Oh yeah.
And I said, like, so I was like, if he wins the 100, then like the 200, like I don't think anyone's gonna touch him in the 2.
No, and he ran the 100 like I mean the some of the group chats that I was in, particularly one with my in-laws, they were like just gushing about it, and like obviously trying to talk to me about it, because it's like, hey, you like track, right? And I'm like, he ran it like such a 200-meter runner, and yet he still won. Like, and that's like, and he looks like Bolt in that way. Like, that's how Bolt would run. Like, Bolt was a 200-meter runner. He would just do enough out of the blocks and then finish like a runaway train. And that's exactly what Lyles did. I mean, the perfect timing of the lean and everything. It was, I mean, just, and the fact that we didn't know who won for like 30 seconds.
That's what I want to ask you. When they crossed the line, and the commentators like, so I did. I swear to God, people are going to be like, he crosses the line, and the comment, Thompson has won, and blah blah blah. I'm British, and I'm just like, wait. No, I could have sworn Noah maybe got him by like this much, or maybe they already have the live results. I was like, damn, okay, I guess. But I've literally never seen a race that close ever.
Yeah, I thought I thought Lyles, like with like 10 meters to go, I was like, I think he might, but then like I was like, I don't think he quite got there, and the suspense for everyone was insane.
I thought it was odd that the commentators made such a convincing like he won statement, when I'm like, there's no way you could tell. So anything further? Women's 5K wrapped up.
We didn't think we would see as an impressive performance from Nico Young, I think, for the rest of the year, after his 3:57 at 7,000 feet in the mile. And yet he won up that significantly by running 12:57, a collegiate record, the youngest American ever to run sub 13, running 12:57. Just an incredible performance. You wrote a wonderful piece about the race, and I think it again goes back to what we talked about when he ran the mile. You just forget about like all the national implications, and there are some, there are a lot, and we'll get to that. This is one of the most incredible races that we have seen in years, and from a collegiate perspective. We are all going to remember where we were, how we heard about this performance, it's just staggering. I don't think either of us thought, I mean, especially like a year ago, that we would see a sub 13 collegiate performance, at least for at least another half decade. And for Nico to do it this year on the back of his mile performance, he's putting together, and of course he's got to finish the job with some national titles, but he's putting together one of the all-time great NCAA seasons that we've ever seen.
It is absurd. Here's I'm sorry. I'm just like, it's so incredible. But here's what I said about Nico Young before the race, and I want to feel a lot of pride in this, but I feel like everyone could have seen a monster performance coming. So here's what I said. I said, I don't think I've ever been as high on Nico Young as I am right now. In fact, I'll go ahead and say I think he's going to break the NCAA record on Friday. He's run the 737, the altitude 357, which converts to 348. But if you put that all aside, he's a veteran primed for a monster performance. He historically thrives in fast-paced settings that are time trials esque, I guess. And that is exactly what Friday night was. When you look at the number of pros in this field, it's unlikely that we don't see multiple sub-13 performances. That is what I said. And I went on to predict that he would run 12:59. And that was still too slow.
It's wild.
Do you understand? Does anyone understand what I predicted a collegiate to run 12:59, and it really wasn't even that close to what he actually ran. It's a full 2 seconds. I'm at a loss for words. I was like, it's so incredible. It's a historic performance. It's a historic American performance. It's one that we will probably go on to talk about in American lore in the same way that I kind of compared it to Alan Webb, just in terms of the similarities of the magnitude of what that meant for their respective levels. I have been critical of Young in the past, but you're right. I have never seen someone put together a season like this, and we're not even February yet.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. And for someone like you who is generally, I want to say conservative with your predictions, but you generally are more realistic. You don't go like try to go overboard. Well, I haven't been realistic
the past 2 years, I guess, but I mean, I'm having a good year. I'm having a good season right now. But go on.
You are, and I think that, and I say all of that because for you to go and predict sub 13 is like someone who was saying like 12:55 almost. Like I think that's a really aggressive mark for you, and for him to even outpace that is nuts. And I think there's a bigger conversation. We don't have the time to get into it today, but you look at these incredible American high schoolers who have come into the collegiate scene, and most of them, even the very, very best, I'm talking about like the Nico Young, the Grant Fishers, the Caitlin Toohey, they come in with such hype that it's pretty much impossible for them to match expectations, at least in their first year or two. And most of them really didn't meet expectations in their first year, but they were good. And I think there's just something to be said about, and this goes for like this past class, the Young twins, I think are another example. Like if you're solid in that first year, you can expect such big things in the future. And Nico was better than solid his freshman year. So was Grant. But like Caitlin too, we didn't see a whole lot of her freshman year. And yet she comes along and is incredible. I think we need to understand that if you're at least, you're good in your freshman year, then we can, and you come in with that kind of pedigree, don't like be impatient. It's gonna come. And we've seen it time after time. And Nico Young's another great example of that.
Yeah. I mean, especially more recently, like Jenna Hutchins is another example.
Yeah.
Like you kind of look at what she did. I mean, she, I want to say at one point had like the high school national record. I don't know if that was like ratified or what it was, but, or at the very least, she was one of the fastest 5K high school runners ever. I think ran like 15:34.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, come on, come on. And now she runs 15:30 this past weekend, which is, a fantastic step, and just goes to show, be patient, like you mentioned. But when going back to just Nico Young, it's so unbelievable. And like he made a move and then another move, and you just don't expect him to then make that third move. And he does it. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And I'm still in awe. And I so desperately want him to win a title. I so desperately want to. And this is it. I mean, he is primed to do something crazy special. I mean, like if he can just get a one title, he might put himself in the Bowerman conversation. And as we all know, the Bowerman is not friendly to distance runners ever, at least not recently, I should say. So I'm going to stop myself before I keep going in this circular, oh my gosh moment. But congratulations to Nico Young. I think this is what we saw his ceiling could be, and he's hit it. And that is not set for everyone. That's for sure.
I think he's blown through the ceiling. Like to run 12:57, I think that exceeds our wildest expectations of him coming in. And I think your point about him being able to make another move and yet another move, I think that's the difference this year. He could always make that first move or two to separate himself and to give himself some space, but he struggled to have that extra gear when someone comes up near him, or when he's just trying to accelerate and change the pace for like a third or fourth time. And he seems to just have those gears this year. And that bodes very, very well for the national meet.
Yeah. I mean, like, he was still running pretty quick at the end there. And it's ironic that the guy who outkicked him is Adrian Wildscoot, who's even said in his post-race interviews, which you can find on TSR YouTube, by the way. He's like, yeah, like I've been like working on my kick, working on my finishing speed. I was not great in college with my finishing speed. And he just says that over and over and over again. And now, ironically, he just beats Nico Young in a kind of I don't want to say a kicker's race and a 12:56 win, but like you get what I'm saying. So
from last week was the men's 1500. And do you have words? I don't think I have words.
No, it's funny because I'm in the middle of the work day. I'm just like, I forget what time the 1500 is on, and I just see our Slack group just explode. And I'm like, all right, I don't want to read. I don't want to like, I just see stuff is happening. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to pull up, get Peacock up. I'm going to rewind a little bit and try to avoid any spoilers. And I just watch a masterpiece, like an absolute, like, the storylines coming in where it was obviously Ingebrigtsen versus Kerr. You felt good about all three Americans making the final. You thought that Nagoose and Hocker had chances at medaling. Like, I think that was in the background, but they certainly weren't one of the top two favorites. And they come in, and it just goes about as well as you could have asked for from an American perspective. It was incredible. The speed at which Ingebrigtsen took this race out was stunning. Like, just I think it was 151 or something through 800.
It's almost like 152. Yeah,
like it was just, I mean, blistering, and like all the American guys just were seemingly unaffected, which I think shows you how far U.S. middle distance running has come. When Centrowitz won, that was a big deal, but that was run in a way that basically changed the event forever in terms of how it is run at an Olympic level, because they didn't want someone to just win with a kick, and now you have to be able to have that strength, and we proved as a country that we're able to do that, which I think is the most spectacular thing of it all.
I mentioned on the podcast last week how you never want to be reactionary, right? You never want to be like, well, this race was the best and this is the best runner ever. Like, you never want to be reactionary to such monumental performances. And yet, I'm trying to figure out what American male distance performance has ever been of this magnitude. Because it's one thing to run as fast as Hocker did. It's one thing to take down the all-time elites that he did. It's one thing for him to be the underdog that he was. It's another thing for him to run as fast and then to also do it on the Olympic stage to win gold. I really do have to go back. Maybe I'm missing something that's blatantly obvious as the marquee performance of American distance running. I don't know if I am. And someone, please, in the comments, in our DMs, email, whatever, suggest something. In my lifetime, I cannot remember a performance as incredible as that. In my lifetime, I think that was the best American male performance, distance-wise, that I've ever seen personally.
Yeah, I mean, you even just take it like we've seen, obviously, U.S. men win Olympic titles before. It's rare, but it's not something that we've never seen before. But like you said, the way that Hocker did it, and then on top of that, it wasn't like this was just one guy's performance, where it's like, hey, that we have this one generational talent on the U.S. side that makes us look good. No, it was the entire team.
Mm-hmm.
And a young team at that. Like, this is not a group of like veterans going into their last like hitting their like end of their prime. This is a group entering their prime that they should all be back again in 4 years and be just as good, if not better. And I think that's what makes this performance all the more greater. Is this isn't just one fluky like guy that's just having a crazy day. This is a group of guys that are proving that if you make the U.S. team, not only are you a favorite to make the final, but you're also capable of medaling or even winning, which is something that we just haven't been able to say really in years past. And I think that is why, to your point, this is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Olympic male performances that we've seen from the U.S. And it's certainly going to be one that I put in my YouTube catalog right along that Centrowitz race of just stuff I'm going to watch every like month or so when I just like want to watch a great race. Like, this is one I'm going to keep coming back to.
Yeah, I had someone who was in the hospital. They're all good, but they were basically out of commission for like that 2-day span of madness. And they're like, well, what happened? And I was like, oh, here's the link. Enjoy. Cover the title. Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was pretty special.
In her first 10,000 meter race, she runs 30:50 to demolish the record, demolish the field. I mean, it's like I guess the only thing I can compare it to is when you're playing like a video game, whether it's like
exactly
2K or whatever, you're on like a rookie setting, you're on my player, and you're just putting up 60 points a game and just destroying everybody. That's where we're at with Valby. Yeah. Like, she is playing on rookie mode when everyone else is on like hard or difficult or whatever it is, world class. She is just on a different planet than everyone else in the NCAA right now.
It's so, like, I don't know what to say at this point. Like, I thought, okay, it's her first 10K race ever. And more importantly, the women's 10K record set by Lisa Cole in 2010 was 31:18. If you really kind of think about it, that record hasn't really been threatened.
No.
At all. Like, no one's really come all that close since it was set. Like, go back down the all-time list. So I thought, okay, is she capable of breaking the record? Yes, I think she is. Would I be surprised if she broke the record? No, I wouldn't be. But I had her at like 31-21 on my predictions. I think, okay, you know what? In a field that's not going to push her, in a field where she'll be all by herself, which frankly she's actually
she always is.
Yeah, always is. In her first ever 10K against a record that has really not been threatened, I thought it wasn't a crazy suggestion to say that she'll be 3 seconds off the record. No, she ran 30:50. She destroyed it. And it wasn't even close, actually. She beat it by 28 seconds. And
Negative split.
I don't She comes through the 5K in 15:30. And do you remember like that Simpsons meme where it's like the guy chuckling like, haha, I'm in danger? That was me and my predictions. And so that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole NCAA right now is we're in danger. Like, there's nothing you can do
No.
to stop her because she's run like this for her whole career, but she's reached a level of fitness where it doesn't matter what type of race you want to run. She's just going to run her race and you can't touch her. Like, she is that much better than everyone else. And yeah, I mean, we're running out of superlatives to throw at her at this point, but I mean, it's just a question of how much she wins at NCAA, how many races she decides to compete at NCAAs, and whether or not she's going to be in Paris with you.
Well,
That's
a month later.
yeah, a month later, exactly. That's really the only questions that you have for Parker Valby at this point.
Do you think she does the 5K, 10K double at nationals?
She shouldn't, but that doesn't mean I don't think she will.
Correct.
I think she'll just do the 5K. For someone who runs as little as she does, doing an extra 6-mile race when she doesn't really need to seems like a bridge too far for me.
Yeah, I imagine Florida is also going to be like, but hey, we're trying to win a national title.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe she does the 10K, and then they're like, okay, well, if we need you in the 5K, good.
Yeah, run.
I don't know. It's like, oh, there's always that honest effort. Like you need a medical waiver. The medical waiver, honest. There's people who always hop out of those, like the 3K at the international meet,
right?
Like the 5K, because they appeal for whatever reason. They always get it, but so that could happen. But I'm not saying that will or will not happen. But yeah, that's it. I don't I will say this is if you polled the general public who knows the sport, how many of them would you say has the Tui Valby discussion? How split do you think that discussion would be?
I think it's like 50-50 at this point.
I
think you can make a compelling argument on either side of that debate. Valby's crushing people like Tui, I don't think ever quite did, but Tui still got, I think, more records still at this point, and more NCAA titles. So it's and she beat Valby, right? And that's something that like Valby can't really say as many times as Tui can, that when they went head to head, right?
I guess Tui does have. I'm trying to think. Tui, yeah, 5. Tui has 5 titles, right? I guess so because she won. Never mind. I think 6. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's
close enough. But now it's a conversation. But now we're getting to the point where it's a conversation where Valby wins one last spring, 1 in the fall, 2 in the winter. I mean, if she wants to, she could win 2.
Yeah,
in the spring. So,
yep, it's right there. All right, let's move on.
Mike Smith has decided at the end of the 2024-2025 season, he will be taking a professional coaching job with Nike, and in extension, Jared Cornfield will be taking over as director at Northern Arizona. Immediate thoughts to this. I mean, this was something that I was a little bit in the ether. I think, and this makes a lot of sense why Cornfield did not leave for any other jobs, like maybe I hypothesized. And obviously, Mike Smith has coached a lot of his former athletes professionally, so you could see that this was a possibility. Still, groundbreaking news for the best coach on the dynasty of our lifetime is leaving, and that brings a whole lot of uncertainty to the sport in general.
How surprised were you when you heard that news come out?
I think I was like a 7 or 8, because like there's no reason he couldn't have just kept coaching like his pro athletes in Flagstaff, and coaching at NAU. But it seems like
let
Mike
me
Smith's always
rephrase
beat
that.
by his own drum. So I think that's where it's a little less surprising.
Let me rephrase that. Okay, so when the initial shock is a surprise, or when you sit down and go through it, is it a surprise?
The initial, like it makes
Okay,
sense when you sit down and
right.
think about it. Like this was always going to be kind of his next job if he was going to take another job, right?
Yeah.
There probably wasn't. I always thought it was very unlikely that he would ever take another collegiate coaching position, at least right away from leaving NAU. So joining the professional ranks makes the most sense.
I really thought he would have gone to Oregon if that Oregon job was not going to go to
Interesting.
Schumacher, but um, I don't know. I felt like that was definitely the one collegiate program that he could have maybe fit in with. But yeah, I'm not surprised. Like like the initial shock. It's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. That certainly is a surprise. But let's go through 4 reasons why this is not a surprise.
Sure.
One, they already had conversations, Nike and Smith, a few years ago, and
Yeah.
actually Nike offered a contract to Smith, which he declined. So there had already been dialogue established. Two, what else does he really have to accomplish in the
Sure.
NCAA? If the women go on to win the national title this year, which they very easily could, I don't know, well, easily, your definition, I don't know, but like, what else would he have to do? So that's 2. 3, Nico Young is his marquee athlete. Nico Young is now just turning pro. It is extremely difficult to envision a world where Nico and Smith are not attached at the hip, from a training and racing perspective. And then number 4, which I forget what that argument even was to begin with, but there's a 4th point, I swear, and I think it just matches up and aligns extremely well. So,
And
yeah,
to your point, I think the caveat in there is that he's allowed to continue coaching
right.
athletes that are sponsored by other companies. I think was a very vital piece in probably ensuring that he would take this job. I'm not sure if he takes it otherwise. I don't know if that would have been a deal breaker, but it certainly, I think, made it that much more of an attractive offer where he could continue to coach guys that he's coached over the years, even though they're not sponsored by Nike.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine Nike just came in and they're like, "We'll give you everything," and it's hilarious because my dad a month and a half ago, 2 months goes, "Hey, did you see this news article? It's about Nike, like basically coming out and saying, hey, we were behind the ball in terms of our investment in the running division when the pandemic struck, and actually a lot of
Mhm.
competition from the running perspective closed the gap there, and they said we're going to start reinvesting more heavily again." Wow. Well, wouldn't you know? It's all of a sudden they hire Mike Smith. And by the way, that 4th point, the NCAA is changing so rapidly.
I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
The mid majors are going to get crushed. Now, NAU will have some perseverance. There's going to be clearly an investment into that cross country program. But I don't know if I'm Mike Smith, I don't know if I want to be recruiting against all these schools that, as we have seen, have been just grabbing every international standout that they can get. And so if there's ever a time for him to go, this is it.
Yeah. And I was going to mention that later too, that in a world that is becoming more and more professionalized, what really is the difference in terms of like
True.
coaching at the pro level versus the collegiate level? And in fact, the pro level is going to have so many less strings attached to it. It's going to be so much easier. You're not going to have to deal with so many different bureaucracies, whether it's the school, it's the NCAA. Like I think there are going to be some coaches that like are just tired of having to do all the recruiting, and decide to jump ranks to the professional side. I mean, there's only a select few that can do that, but I think we're seeing from Mike Smith that is more of an attractive position than maybe it was 6 months ago before all this the NCAA settlement stuff has occurred. Do we think, to that point, do we think we're going to see any other coaches kind of make this jump? As you were mentioning, Nike's seemingly pushing to regain a foothold, or not a foothold, but regain their
Momentum.
clear superiority in the running arena. Do you think they're going to be targeting anybody else? Because when Bowerman's obviously dropped off with Schumacher leaving, On has really been on the rise with their OAC group, and there really isn't a marquee Nike group, and there used to be several. And so, do we think that there could be another domino to fall here?
Absolutely. I talked to one coach who is really, they're just really well connected, and they really know a lot about these kind of nuances. What they had said, and again, I'm not reporting this, but this is just what some individual told me, and it was that Nike will probably move off of maybe the investment of the Union Track Club and
Yep.
Bowerman, and they want to apparently have flagship training spots in Flagstaff, which obviously, like I've been told by multiple people, they will have a pro group in Flagstaff. Nike will.
Makes sense.
And then they're going to have one in Park City, or they would like to have, I guess, one in Park City, Portland, and Boulder. Like that's essentially what they want to do, is dominate the West Coast, or Western half, I should say, which would be pretty fun. I'm not going to lie. Could you imagine if you're Boulder, you have Colorado with an entire new coaching staff there and all these new transfers. You have On Athletics Club with all these Olympians, and then Nike just giving you like a double middle finger and being like, we're also here. That would be a ton of fun. I can't lie.
Well, I think I had maybe mentioned something along that line when we were talking about the Carlson news about
You did say that. Yeah, you did.
I mentioned that Carlson may be down the road, but also just the fact that, hey, I think Nike's probably going to set up shop there, or look to set up shop there in the future, and maybe that's going to come sooner than we expect. So yeah, I it's not a surprise, I think, to those of us who have been paying attention to the sport, that Nike is making a big push to reassert themselves, at least in American distance running, and really create marquee pro groups that are top of the line. And what better person to get to lead that push than Mike Smith? I think that's a perfect fit. Now let's talk about from like NAU's perspective. Obviously, losing Mike Smith, huge loss, and it's so interesting to me that NAU has had this like coach in waiting thing now twice with when Mike Smith came on initially. And Coach Eric Hines was there for a year in his farewell year, and then they won the national championship. Now Mike Smith gets to have kind of his farewell season before Jared Cornfield gets elevated to the director role. What do we think this portends for NAU in the long term, though, with Cornfield at the helm?
It's tough because, like I mentioned, the NCAA landscape is changing dramatically, and he's now he's going to be thrown into his first year as director, is going to be the first year where all these changes are relevant.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing as Hines, giving Mike Smith a national title team. It's just not. And at least on the men's side, I should say, the women might actually still retain and be okay. But I don't know. I will say that, like, I don't know. I couldn't envision. And I mean, you even saw on our Slack page how I was like, I don't know how anyone other than Cornfield could have possibly be that director role. I mean, there was no other question. He was easily the most deserving. It's clear why there was no more pursuit of Colorado. So, excuse me. I don't know. I think it's in a tough spot because this is still a podium team, but is it a podium team next year too? And I don't think we have that answer yet.
Yeah, I think NAU is already staring down an uncertain future with Mike Smith. I mean, this was going to be clearly, I think, their worst team that they've had in years. Coming up, at least on the men's side, best team potentially that they've had on the women's side, as you mentioned. But with the new rules going into place, this was going to be like something that NAU was going to be affected by probably the most out of the top tier cross country programs, just because they're not connected to a major conference. And and that was going to be even with arguably the best coach in the sport. And now you throw in someone who has never been a director before, obviously has tons of experience with this program, leading this program in a variety of different ways, but has to learn to do that and learn all these new responsibilities of how to recruit in this new way. And I just think it, like you said, leads to a lot of uncertainty. And I think this gives the Oklahoma States, the BYUs of the world, like a chance to like grab a much more secure foothold to like the top of the NCAA picture over the next few years. And not to say that NAU can't get back there, but it's just it seems like we're shifting into a non NAU era, and this kind of solidifies that in terms of like
Yeah,
winning national championships. I'm not saying
sure, sure,
relevancy, but
sure. And I guess I can maybe see what you're saying, just in terms of strictly national titles.
yeah.
I also want to remind everyone they're still probably a podium team.
Oh
Again, like
yes,
they're
yeah.
still probably a podium team, and they might even still be next year. I haven't looked at the eligibility yet, but um, yeah, we'll see. I think Cornfield is the right call. There was no
Yep.
other option that I would have even considered. But yeah, he's gonna have his work cut out for him, and I think he knows that. So, man, I love this sport. This is so great.
It's insanely fascinating. I mean, the amount of top tier jobs that have come up over the last like
Mhm.
5 years, pretty much every premium position that you could ask for in this sport has come up at some point in the last 5 years, which is
Yeah,
just staggering.
Oregon,
And
NAU, Colorado. Yeah,
Is Hilda
yeah,
Olemomoi
it's
of
been incredible.
Alabama is now on the transfer portal. One of the best long distance stars in the country, with eligibility, I believe one full year. Is that correct?
two cross, one
Okay.
on track.
Okay. So, and one of the best cross country runners in the country, obviously. So, those 2 years of cross country are huge for whatever program she ends up being. I mean, you could argue she's been the best non Parker Valby runner uh, in like from 3K up this year. And for whoever she lands with is going to see their stock raise dramatically. I know you laid out a few teams in your first thoughts article, or
I was
Donnie did. Donnie
Donnie
did.
did,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. What are your thoughts on where she could end up?
Real quick though, do you think she was better than Ramsden or Lemongol?
I not Ramsden, like, and that's why I did the 3K up. Like, I
Oh,
was
the
trying to
3K.
like
Okay, okay. I didn't see
shoehorn
that.
Ramsden out of that conversation
Oh,
and
I
kind of
didn't see.
shoehorn
Okay,
Lemon out of that conversation
okay,
because
yeah.
now I would agree that those two are better.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. I've talked to a few people about this. They're convinced it's Florida.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Hilda Olemomoi, excuse me, is at Alabama currently. Her former coach Will Palmer left last summer to go to Florida to head the distance events. Brought in former teammate Flamina Ascall. I'm pretty. I feel like it's going to be Florida. That's based on who I've talked to. I don't think anything's like set in stone or firm or it's finalized. So like, don't aggregate me on that end. But from a lot of the coaches, well, I mean, it happens. It happens. I just know what's going to happen. It's going to pull up Bill Simmons. It's like he said this. It's like no, I didn't say that. But from what I've been hearing, Florida will probably be the natural fitting point for her, especially just with the rumor mill suggesting the same. So, um, yeah, I don't really have much more on that just because I feel like that's probably where she'll end up. That's probably where you think she'll end up too.
Yeah, I mean, Parker Valby probably not coming back. Is that something we feel comfortable
I would be
saying?
stunned,
Yes. Okay.
stunned, stunned,
So
stunned.
I agree. So there's going to be a
Oh
lot of
wait, actually,
scholarship.
yes, I take this on Instagram. She said it was her last year. Yeah,
Okay,
I think that,
yeah.
yeah.
And so scholarship money opening up at Florida, she would be as good of a replacement to Valby as you could possibly ask for from Florida's perspective, as someone to slide right in there and score you points across multiple seasons and be that true low stick for you on the grass. So yeah, I think there's too many factors lining up that this shouldn't happen. One wild card, and this isn't really even a wild card because they've attracted a lot of talent over the years. This seems like something that Coach Hennis would just like be like, let me just like see what we can do here and see if we can make something work. Let's just continue our dominance in cross country by picking up Olemomoi and like winning another title or two.
Yeah, maybe. They haven't really gone too heavy on internationals.
No, they have not. That's true.
So, which is what makes me a little hesitant to say that. Yeah, like, look, I don't think it's like a dead set thing, but like, could I see New Mexico getting involved? Yes, I could. Absolutely could, especially because they brought in Pamela Kosgei,
Right.
Nicole Jansen comes back, and like
Yeah.
you start piecing together some of those names, it's like that's a pretty good team. I still think it's Florida. It will be interesting though. I'll just tell you this. I've been speaking to multiple coaches, multiple coaches, at least like 4 or 5, maybe more, and all of them are saying, "Buckle up, buckle up." Like it's about to get way messier and way busier. The portal, the coaching changes, the way scholarships are allocated, things are about to get way messier and way more interesting before it gets cleaner and smoother.
We need to have like a whole separate episode about obviously the changes coming to collegiate sports and the ability, like the settlement, the proposed settlement, and the student athletes being paid and all these things. But yeah, it's gonna be a wild summer, almost certainly, and we will definitely have to dive more into that. But yeah, I mean, look, listen, the talents like Olemomoi don't come on the portal that often.
No.
And for her to be changing schools and possibly landing in Florida would be incredible. And no matter where she lands, it's going to be a huge story, and they're going to see their program shift dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that depends on who you think they're going to bring in. Now, I think they're going to bring in more than just Hilda, or
Right.
assuming that they get.
Well, just the fact that like losing Valby won't leave a gaping hole, like that would be a like dramatic.
Which is true.
Yeah,
well, that's true. Is Flomena Asicol coming back? I don't think she is. I don't think Thorner's coming back, and I don't think Mazzadowni's coming back.
Yeah.
So, like, you start going down the list, and you go like, oh no,
they got a lot of work to do.
They got some work to do. So, I think I don't think Palmer's. I think Palmer's going to continue, assuming he gets Hilda, right? I mean, yeah, I think he's going to continue to build off there. I know they brought in a great international name as well, a younger runner for this upcoming year as well. So that could be a huge name. But yeah, where else outside of Florida could I guess you said NC State, but anywhere else that you thought she could potentially land?
No, I mean Arkansas from a internet, like this seems like a also kind of classic kind of fit for them, but outside of that, not really.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Arkansas would definitely, because they returned, I think, a lot of that core, and they were really good last year. I think they were like 9th on the national meet. So you're adding Hilda, that's a podium threat as well.
Absolutely.
All right.
Of course, has to be Ethan Strand, breaking the 3K record by 6 seconds, running 7:30, and Parker Wolf right behind him, his teammate, in second. I wasn't watching it live, but I saw, I think it was Finn in our Slack group just put 7:30. And I was like, oh, like some pro ran 7:30. That's incredibly fast. Like that, like that's cool. And then I looked at the results and I was like, oh no, like 2 collegiates did that. And not really necessarily, like it wasn't like the guys that just won NCAAs or were like top 3 at NCAAs. 2 very talented guys, but I don't think any of us like saw them running. I think Coach Miltenberg even was like, yeah, I thought 7:34, 7:35. Like I thought that would be a pretty great day. They almost broke 7:30 for the first time in collegiate history. I'm at loss for words. You can start.
I remember like they're going through with the pacer, and they're like, they're only like 2 or 3 minutes in, and the announcer's like, they're on 7:30 pace, and I was like, come on, dude. I was like, stop it. They're not running 7:30. Cut it out. And then I blinked, and there's 2 laps to go, and I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna run 7:30. I could not believe it. It was, I still don't believe it. I'm looking at these results. There's, in no world should a collegiate ever run 7:30, ever. Like in the post-race interview that we had with Ethan Strand, which you can find on our YouTube page, he was asked, I think by Jonathan Gold of Let's Run, and he was asked, did you see yourself running 7:30 today? He goes, no, no, of course. He's like you said, 7:34, 7:35, definitely thought the record was in reach. He goes, but then I saw that the world indoor standard was 7:31 flat. And he goes, well, that's ridiculous. We're not going to get that. And they both got it. And on top of Ethan Strand and Parker Wolf running 7:30, Yassine Abdallah ran 7:34, breaking the old record of 7:36. And Gary Martin ran 7:36, just barely slipping under the old record as well. What?
And this is, again, and the other thing I want to point out is we usually see good 3K performances at this meet because, again, like if you're more of a middle distance runner and you've been running cross country, this is like the perfect intersection for you, right? Yep. But it's still hard to run an insanely fast 3K because you've just been preparing for a 10K for the last like 5 months. And now you're jumping into something that is 30% of that distance and expecting to run what they did, 4 flat mile pace for 3,000 meters. And like that is also the thing that just boggles my mind, that they were able to translate that cross country fitness where they both obviously ran very, very well in the 10K. They were very well prepared for the 10K. And then to be able to seamlessly drop down to a 3K and put down this kind of performance. I mean, clearly the wheels were there. I think Strand, he finished in like the last 1600. I thought I saw it was 356 or something. I mean,
oh my God.
Like,
oh my God.
Running 356 right after running a couple weeks after running a hard 10K is impressive. But to have preceded that with like you're at 404 pace for the first 1400 meters is just, it's wild.
I'm in like, oh my God, how does this happen? How do you run 7:30? Both of them. I mean, like these are the things, and you said it kind of in your first mention of this event, where it's like, hey, if I told you that if I told you that this time last year, I said, hey, a year from now, 4 guys are going to break the NCAA 3K record in the same race. In fact, 2 of them are going to run 7:30. You'd be like, oh, did Nico Young come back for another season of eligibility? Did Graham Blanks drop down to the 3K? Like, did another like ultra megastar Kenyan like come over and run this? No, actually, they're just guys that between the 4 of them have 1 national title. And oh, by the way, Strand and Wolf never have finished in the top 5 of the NCAA cross country championships.
Yeah, I think if you would have put together a like power rankings of who was most likely to run 7:30, I think Wolf would have been in like the top 8, maybe.
Let's say probably closer to top 5. Yeah.
Top 5. Yeah. But yeah, Strand, I don't know if he would have made that top 10. Like it's just, it's absolutely staggering. And one other point that I want to make is the facility record is Yair Naguse 7:28. And when he ran that, it was like, oh man, America's next great star, showing like he can run the 15, he can run the 3K. He's going to be the guy and one of the best American pros that we've seen over the last couple of decades. I mean, Ethan Strand and Parker Wolf, who were younger than Naguse at this time, were only like less than 2 seconds off of that. And it just completely makes me think about these guys in a completely different light, especially Strand. Like I think we already really felt that Wolf was a stud, and Strand obviously with his much better cross country performances, you could see this kind of a big leap coming. You couldn't see this kind of leap coming,
right.
But now you're talking about him as, I mean, I don't know how you can't see him as one of the favorites, if not the favorite in this event now, because he clearly has the strength now. And we all know about his closing kick and his speed. And I mean, he closed in 26 to cap off a 7:30 in his last 200 meters. Like, no one, I don't know if anybody's stopping that at the NCAA meet.
Well, I mean, Parker Wolf was 0.07 behind. Like, the only guy who could stop him is probably his own teammate, which is the wildest thing. And you just kind of look at this. And by the way, I know there's been, a very loud contingent of distance fans who have been like, man, all these international names are coming into the NCAA system. And like, is this really even collegiate anymore? I just want everyone to look at these top 5 names. Ethan Strand, American. Parker Wolf, American. Yassine Abdallah grew up in Maryland. He has Sudanese national. I don't know if he has dual citizenship. If you don't want to count him, whatever. I don't know. Gary Martin's American and Nathan Green's an American. Nathan Green 5th in 740. Adam Spencer of Wisconsin in 6th in 740. The Americans have been outstanding. By the way, go check out the 5K. Graham Blanks, right? And then, Brian Massad's the easy second. Nope. Liam Murphy gets second. You look at some of the, like, of all the guys who went under 13:20, you had Dylan Schubert in there too, right? You had Marco Langen, who I've realized we've been saying his last name wrong. Thank you to whoever corrected us.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's good to know. So I'm completely blown away. The Americans have been phenomenal. This is a completely mind-blowing performance. And I think what really gets me about these results is actually that Nathan Green and Adam Spencer both ran 740, and we're not giving them the time of day. Yeah. They're complete afterthoughts.
Yeah. And this is a conversation for deeper December or early January, but I think there is something to the fact that the quality of the NCAA is much higher because of the internationals coming in, and it has forced everyone else to raise their level. And I think that's what you're seeing. Like, Americans coming through the NCAA system. If you're the best in the NCAA, you're now like ready to go and immediately be a force on the international pro stage. And we're seeing that over and over again over the last couple of years. And I think this is another great example of like the benefits of having these international athletes on American distance running is the level just is so much higher, and the barometer to compete is so much higher that I think we're seeing these teams and individuals raise to that level. So can talk more about that, but anything else on these 3Ks, I feel like we could talk the whole episode about this if we wanted to.
Just in complete awe. Go check out the interviews on the site, on the YouTube page. Excuse me. We got it with Ethan Strand, Gary Martin. Go check them out. Well, guys, that is it for us. Thank you all so much for joining us throughout this entire year. Ben and I are incredibly grateful for all the support that we've gotten. And thank you again for supporting Blue Hole Podcast, supporting the Stride Report. We cannot wait to bring you with more content coming soon. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later.